Good evening and welcome to the Licensing Committee meeting of Burnley Borough Council on the 12th of November 2020. Members of the committee present, Councillor Arif Khan, Chair, Councillor Frank Cant, Vice Chair, and Councillors Charlie Briggs, Howard Baker, Paul Campbell, Ivor Emo, Peter Gill, Sarah Hall, Shah Hussain, Margaret Lishman, Asif Raja, Jeff Sumner and Mark Townsend. Officers of the Council, Karen Davies, Environmental Health and Licensing Manager, Emma Barker, Principal Legal Officer, Alison McEwen, Democracy Officer, and Mark Hindman streaming the meeting. Chair, it's over to you.
Thank you, Alison. Good evening, officers, councillors, and members of the public listening to the live stream. Welcome to the licensing meeting. As per agenda, item 1 is asking for apologies, please.
None have been received, Chair.
Right. Item 2 is minutes of the last meeting.
I'll move those minutes, Chair.
Thank you, Frank.
I'll second them, Chair.
Right. Thank you. It's moved and seconded. Right. Okay. Any questions or any observations on minutes? Okay. No. Let's move on to item 3.
Chair,
yes.
Sorry, just before we move on, can I just, Joanne Swift, Head of Street Scene, has joined us.
Okay. Welcome, Joanne. Right. Item 3, additional items of the business.
None, there are none, Chair.
Okay. Item 4, declaration of interest.
No.
Any member? Okay, fine. Item 5, exclusion of the public.
As per agenda, Chair. Sorry, Maggie. Do you like to say that?
Thank you, Howard. Item 6, public question time. Is there any?
There are no questions, Chair.
Okay, that's good. Let's move on to item 7. It's taxi driver application criteria. And I want to hand over to our officer, Karen Davis, please.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report is to resolve some blockages that are in the driver application process which are arising from coronavirus. From April to July, alternative arrangements were introduced which allowed short-term taxi licences to be issued, and they were implemented under emergency powers. And since August, we've been able to more or less return to a normal service, but 3 problems continue to affect an applicant's ability to meet our existing pre-application driver requirements. That's specifically in relation to medicals, knowledge tests, safeguarding training. And the issues, I think, are explained in the report, and options are outlined for each of those criteria, alongside officer recommendations in relation to how we might deal with those. The report also recognises that none of the options are without risk, but I think we need to sort of recognise that we need to balance those risks against opening up opportunities for drivers to get a licence and actually enter work. And so I'm happy to take questions. I think that the report is fairly self-explanatory. One other thing to possibly just mention is that we do also have a legal duty, legal obligations to ensure that we process applications for driver licences. And as things stand, we're not in a position to do that. So we do need to find a way of overcoming the blockages that exist.
Is that it?
I think so. I'm happy to take.
Okay, great. Yeah. Right. Any member, any questions on this item, please?
I've got one, hang on.
Councillor Lishman and then Councillor Baker, I think, Chair.
Yes,
Right. Councillor Lishman, it's your turn, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's extremely important that we do have safety checks in place, and I think this is probably the best way we can achieve it at the present time. What I would like to see is the recommendation to stipulate a period of time for this change in the process to be in place, rather than for it to be open-ended, so that we can review it after a certain number of months. I'd be interested to hear if the officer has a view. My own view was perhaps we needed to look at a period of 6 months, but I don't think the change should be open-ended. I think we need to review its effectiveness, and I think we need to put a time limit on it rather than just have an open-ended process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Baker, do you want to say something? Then
Yes, yes, Chair. It's something along the same lines rather than, but we're issuing a 1-year driver licence on the medicals in particular. That's the main one to me. And like Maggie says, it's open-ended for a year, and presumably after that time they've got to do something. But or you might just add a bit of a ride on, so or until such time as we return a bit more like to normal and can get the things done. Are these only for first-time driving applications as well? So we know absolutely nothing about the applicant. Do you mean rather than someone that's had a medical for the last 5 years and we can sort of say, yeah, it's fine, fine, fine. This is just somebody perhaps coming out of the blue with a just possibly a heart condition or can't see the roads well or anything like that, presumably. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Officer, Karen, you want to respond to these two questions?
Yeah. Firstly, in relation to Councillor Lishman's request for it to have a term, sort of end date on it, I don't really have any objection to that at all. It's just difficult to understand when that might be, because we sort of set off in March expecting that the original temporary measures that we put in place that would last until August would be sufficient, but then we found ourselves entering this next phase. Given what we've heard this week, the news we've had about the vaccines and things, and we sort of maybe can be a little bit more hopeful that we are in a position where things are going to start to improve. Yeah, I wouldn't have any objection to 6 months at all. So I'm happy to take. I'm happy to add that in. I'm happy for you to add that in, should I say? And then in relation to Councillor Baker's question about medicals. This particular situation would apply to all drivers, renewal applications and new applications. The second two criteria, the knowledge test and safeguarding checks, are only there for new applicants onto the fleet. But medicals currently are undertaken once every 3 years. That's the norm. And so any driver coming forward for a renewal would not have normally had a medical for a period of 3 years. And so that's why the duration of the license is proposed to be a 12-month duration, because we recognise that move away from the GP who would know that person best. We're not getting that sort of medical assurance. So where we are relying on a Group 2 medical, we would impose that special circumstances condition of a 1-year license. But then next year, when they come to renew that 1-year license, if they could go back and resume with the GP again, they'd be back into that 3-yearly cycle.
Okay.
Thank you, Officer. I think Mark want to speak. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say I agree with what basically Councillor Lishman has said, and I think Councillor Baker was supporting as well, in terms of, I think what's classed almost like as a sunset clause on this recommendation, really, and 6 months seems appropriate to me, bearing in time where we are. Just in terms of what actually happens, so for clarity, obviously, if a new applicant comes along, these will be the procedures that they go through, and they'll be given a 1-year license. Can I just understand what happens at the end of the 1-year license? Do they go through the standard process again, assuming that everything has gone back to normal? What would actually happen to these applicants?
Thank you, Councillor. Good question. Officer, you want to respond, please?
The applicants would ordinarily, at the end of the 1-year process, be subject to a renewal. That renewal would then, it would make sense in terms of the administrative processes that are in place within the team to all things being equal, extend that license then for a period of 2 years, because we have a sort of co-termination of all of the requirements that are necessary for a 3-year license. That's a DBS check and a medical. So it would make sense to extend it for 2 years. But if it is that we're wanting to say this is a 1-year license, it terminates after 1 year and it renews in full after 1 year, then that would be fine. And at that point, they would re-enter into that 3-year cycle.
Okay.
It's a matter for you to decide, I think. It could work either way. The medical would only ever last for the year, so they would need a new medical after a year. If you're happy for the online checks, for the knowledge check test and the safeguarding test to be a substitute for what we have in place at the moment, in the circumstances that we're in, then that those licenses, provided they came in with a GP's medical, would be for 3 years.
Okay.
Do you follow that? It's only the medical that is the trigger for a 1-year license. The other 2 elements are not triggers for a 1-year license.
Oh, okay, so sorry, Chair, can I just come back for a second just to follow? I think my concern is that these people are going to go through the licensing process with where the process isn't as strenuous as it is normally. Therefore, I feel at the end of the first year of the license, if things have gone back to normal, they should then have to take the standard criteria tests to get through, because at the moment there's perhaps 1 or 2 loopholes that could be missed, and they could then be on the licensing books for 3 years. So I'm just thinking that these are almost temporary licenses that we give for 1 year, and then after 1 year they have to go through the standard process. That's my thoughts. I don't know whether other members agree.
There's nothing at all to stop that recommendation, that being added to the recommendation. That works fine in terms of licensing processes, if that's what members choose to do.
I would like to move that then, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think I've got a couple of people want to
Happy to
speak.
second that,
Councillor Baker.
Yeah, basically, I think I'm in agreement with Mark. It's just the knowledge test and the safeguarding. We made a great big thing out about a couple of years ago about how important it was. So I'd hate someone to slip through the net and not be able to recognise problems with his passengers, or her passengers, should I say, and things like that. So I think they should be more fully done after this temporarily 1-year licence, I think, and they come back and take them again under more controlled conditions rather than just signing it off themselves. So I agree with Mark on that.
Okay, yeah, I think Councillor Lishman want to speak as well. Alison,
Chair-
you want to say something?
Councillor Kant has also been waiting to speak for a while as well.
Sorry, who is the one?
Councillor Kant.
Oh, all right, yeah. So, yeah, before Councillor Lishman, Councillor Kent, please, then I'll come back to this Councillor. Sorry, Councillor Lishman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It seems that we've got 3 options, or rather, we've got 3 decisions to make, and we've got officer recommendation, and we've an alternative recommendation. I personally think that on the medical, the officer recommendation is the option 2, I think is fine. With the other 2, I would actually go for option 1 and temporarily suspend the knowledge tests and the other one, what was
Safeguarding.
yeah, yeah. I think we could say put them off for say 6 months. I would be prepared to go with the option 1. I think the difficulty being that a lot of these drivers, a lot of these people will not possibly have access to a computer, or they're not computer literate, and if they're not, they're more likely to get someone else to help them, which defeats the object. So that's the stance that I would make, but I would unless other people agree with me, I would support the option 2.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kant. I've
Yeah,
got
thank
two other
you.
speakers, yeah, and then I'll hand over to officer for respond. Or if Karen, do you want to respond to these two proposals or questions? Then I've got Councillor Dishman and Councillor Shausen as well.
I think in relation to the safeguarding and the knowledge tests, I think my view would be something is better than nothing. And we're asking them to make a self-declaration that they've done it themselves. But I recognise absolutely that we want to have as many checks and balances in place as we can. And I think that a 1-year licence is an appropriate check and balance in relation to those sort of online arrangements that, granted, can be abused, but nevertheless, as I've said, I think something is better than nothing.
Right. Alison, I've just seen a flash of Joanne Swift. You wanted me to speak to her before?
And
go to
Councillor Hussain as well, please, Chair.
Yeah.
And Councillor Lishman.
Lishman, yeah.
It's
So which
gesticulating.
one is the first one?
I am.
I think Councillor Lishman, then Councillor Hussain, and then Joanne.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you,
Councillor
Chair.
Lishman, my apologies. Yes, your turn now.
Thank you. I'm not sure if you heard, but I wanted to second Councillor Townsend's suggestion. I think it's absolutely correct in what he's saying. This should be a 1 year and then go back to begin the process again. Equally, I would like to propose that the change to the taxi licensing criteria, if passed tonight, is valid for a period of 6 months only, and will come back to the licensing committee for either renewal or removal after that period of time, and I'd appreciate if somebody would second it. I agree wholeheartedly with the officers that I think something is better than nothing, and I think it's important that we do it, continue to appear to abide by the standards that we've set. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you,
I would
Councillor.
second Magga.
Councillor Shausen, please, it's your turn.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, I just wanted to check, if we're going away from what the officers are recommending, and we're recommending a 1-year renewal, will the fees reflect that? Because I'm conscious of these people who, will they be lumbered with double whammy in terms of fees? Or would the fees be reduced to reflect the 1 year? That's my concern, Chair. And I wonder if officers could enlighten us with that. Thank you.
Right. Karen, you want to respond this? Then I'll go to Joanne Swift.
Yeah, we already have 1-year licenses that take account of the reduction in the period of time that they're issued for. We issue special circumstances 1-year licenses as a matter of course now for people whose medicals are not cleared for a 3-year license. Sometimes GPs put some sort of a, like a caveat on their medical, and that license would only be issued for a year. In fact, there are a number of special circumstances that would qualify. This is just another special circumstances. So it doesn't complicate the procedure or the policy at all. And the fee is set already.
Okay, right. Next is Joanne Swift.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, because I think members have already probably made the points I wanted to make. Just to say, as Karen alluded to at the beginning of her report, none of these options that we are presenting are without risk. We recognise that. But as the point has already been made, it's better to do something rather than nothing. We are trying to balance that we're supporting the trade, that they can still exist. It's a real tough economy, we know at the moment, but obviously we also want to make sure that where possible safeguards are in place. What I would say, and obviously it's a decision that's up to members in terms of whether we choose to suspend testing on knowledge and safeguarding, I'd just like to remind members both those elements in previously have taken considerable energy to implement, and for very valid reasons. As we know, So I wouldn't want to lose that momentum. And that's all I needed to say, Chair.
Thank you, officer. I've got another councillor name, Peter Gill. Can you confirm, Alison? Is he on the list?
Yes, he is, Chair.
Yeah, Councillor Gill, please, your turn.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just like to support Councillor Lishman's idea of the 6 months. In regards to suspending any type of safeguarding, to me would be a step backwards. As the officer has already stated, that they will have to sign a declaration that they have done it. And we have, and me and some of the other councillors have been in meetings where people have obviously ticked they've done it themselves, but we've always found out if they haven't or not and taken the appropriate action against them. That's basically the point. What I have, and also I would like to second what Councillor Lishman was saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Alison, it's been moved and seconded.
Can I just, can we just be clear, please, Chair? Councillor Townsend moved that this process should be for the 1 year temporary licence, and that at the end of that 1 year, all things being back to normal, we should move back to the full 3 yearly cycle. Councillor Townsend, can I just check, was that moving option 2 for each of the options? So going with the officer recommendation regarding the medicals and the safeguarding and the online knowledge test, just because we have had a proposal that those could be, some of those could be suspended. So can you just...
It was taking the officer recommendation, yeah.
And were you happy with Councillor Lishman's proposal to bring it back in 6 months and review?
I was, yes.
Yeah,
Well, I
all
am.
right. So we have that, we have all of that moved and seconded. So we can now go to the vote on that if you're happy, Chair.
Yes, I'm fine. Yeah, so you can flash the voting procedures.
Just a small point, because Frank actually, after that was moved and seconded, Frank proposed an amendment. Now I'm going to go with Mark, so I don't know if that's going to make any difference to Frank, but what we should be voting on is Frank's amendment that we take option 1.
Well, that hasn't been seconded, Councillor Baker. So if there is somebody that wishes to second that, then we could take that amendment.
I'll second that, Alison.
Right.
Okay. So we now need to go to the vote on Councillor Cant's amendment, which is that the following options are selected, so that a group...
Alison, sorry to interrupt, but I didn't actually move it. It was just a point that I was making. I'm certainly not moving it. I'm quite happy to go along with with the motion as it stands.
Okay, so
I just thought it wise to bring up that in case other people may have felt the same way.
Sorry, Frank.
So I was
okay. Right. Okay. So that's not moved or seconded.
No.
So we will go back to Councillor Townsend's motion, seconded by Councillor Leishman. Are we wanting a roll call for the vote, or are you happy as a committee to do it by assent? So if there's no dissent, yeah. Okay. So
whichever way is the easiest one. Yeah.
What I will do is I will unmute everybody now. If anybody wishes to indicate any dissent, if you could do that verbally. Right, Chair, nobody has indicated any dissent, so I think we can take that as carried.
Right, thank you. So this item is carried unanimously, yeah, and quite healthy debate. Thank you so much for all the contributions from the councillors. Now we are moving to vote item 8, which is a separate sheet here. So
No, I think that's just the participants list, Chair.
Yeah,
Yeah, we got this separate sheet, if you can see that, yeah.
it's just how to log on.
Item 8,
Harry.
yes. It's just the instructions how to log in, like, yeah.
It shouldn't come as an agenda item, really.
Is it not?
Very
For-
confusing.
Right, if
I'll
that's the
declare an
case, yeah,
interest.
and if that is, then yeah, we can
Yeah.
close the meeting.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you, everyone. Have a
Bye.
safe
Chair,
journey.
good
Back in
night.
to living room. A nice cup of tea, and meeting is closed.
Thank you, Chair.